Sarah Martinez stepped off the bus at the military training facility, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete grounds as dozens of new recruits gathered around the entrance. At 24 years old, Sarah looked like any other young woman ready to serve her country. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the same standard civilian clothes as everyone else. The other recruits barely glanced at her. Most were men, talking loudly about their expectations and background. A few other women stood in small groups looking nervous but determined. Sarah remained quiet, observing everything around her with calm, alert eyes that had seen more than anyone could imagine. "Listen up, recruits," a drill sergeant's voice boomed across the courtyard. "You're here for basic training, and I guarantee most of you won't make it through the first week. This isn't summer camp, and we're not here to hold your hand." Sarah had heard similar speeches before, though the other recruits didn't know that. To them, she was just another civilian trying to prove herself worthy of wearing the uniform. They had no idea that she had already proven herself in ways that would shock them all. The group was led into a large building where they would complete their initial processing. Sarah moved with the crowd, filling out paperwork and going through medical checks. The other recruits chatted nervously, sharing stories about why they joined and what they hoped to achieve. "What about you?" asked Jessica, a blonde woman from Texas who had been assigned the bunk next to Sarah's. "What made you want to join the military?" Sarah smiled politely. "I want to serve my country and challenge myself," she replied, which was true enough, though it barely scratched the surface of her real story. During the physical fitness assessment, Sarah performed well but not exceptionally. She completed the required push-ups, sit-ups, and running times with solid scores that put her in the upper middle range. She was careful not to stand out too much. The last thing she wanted was unnecessary attention or questions about her abilities. That evening, as the recruits settled into their barracks, Sarah lay on her narrow bunk listening to the conversations around her. Some recruits boasted about their high school athletic achievements. Others worried about whether they would be strong enough for the challenges ahead. "I heard the dropout rate is really high," whispered Marcus, a young man from Ohio. "My brother tried this 2 years ago and quit after 3 days." "Don't worry about it," replied Jake, who seemed to have appointed himself the unofficial leader of their group. "Just stick with me and do what I do. I've been preparing for this my whole life." Sarah almost smiled at that comment. She had been preparing for this her whole life too, but in ways these recruits couldn't possibly understand. Her real preparation had happened in some of the most dangerous places on Earth, under circumstances that would test every limit of human endurance and courage. The next morning came early, as it always did in military training. Sarah was already awake when the lights came on at 0500 hours. She had developed the habit of waking up before any alarm, a skill that had saved her life more than once in situations these recruits would never face. During breakfast, she sat with Jessica and a few other women recruits. They talked about their families and their concerns about the upcoming training. Sarah shared just enough personal information to seem normal without revealing anything significant about her background. "My dad was in the Army," said Lisa, a quiet woman from Oregon. "He always said the hardest part isn't the physical training, it's the mental pressure." "That makes sense," Sarah agreed, though she knew from experience that the real mental pressure came from making life-or-death decisions in split seconds while under enemy fire. These training exercises, no matter how challenging, were still just exercises. The first week of training was exactly what Sarah expected. The drill sergeants yelled, the physical demands were significant, and several recruits struggled to keep up. A few dropped out, unable to handle the stress and discipline required. Sarah performed consistently well without drawing too much attention. She helped other recruits when she could, offering quiet encouragement and practical advice. Her calm demeanor and steady performance began to earn respect from her fellow trainees. "You're really good at this stuff," Jessica commented one evening after Sarah had helped her improve her rifle cleaning technique. "Have you done military training before?" "Just some civilian programs," Sarah replied vaguely. "Nothing too serious." What Jessica didn't know was that Sarah had spent years mastering skills that went far beyond basic military training. She had operated in hostile territories where a single mistake meant death not just for herself, but for entire mission teams. She had learned to shoot with precision that would amaze these instructors, and she had developed physical and mental toughness through trials that would break most people. but none of that showed on the surface. To everyone around her, Sarah Martinez was just another recruit trying to make it through basic training. She woke up early, followed orders, completed her assignments, and supported her fellow trainees. She laughed at the right moments, showed appropriate concern during difficult exercises, and maintained the exact image of a dedicated but unremarkable new soldier. The drill sergeants noticed her steady performance but saw nothing unusual. Her fitness scores were good but not exceptional. Her shooting was accurate but within normal ranges for someone with some previous experience. Her leadership qualities emerged naturally, but many recruits showed similar potential. As the days passed, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying some aspects of the basic training experience. There was something refreshing about the simplicity of it all. Clear rules, straightforward objectives, and the opportunity to help others succeed. It was very different from the complex, high-stakes operations that had defined her recent years. The other recruits began to look up to her, drawn to her quiet confidence and helpful nature. She became someone they could rely on for support and guidance, though none of them suspected that her ability to provide that guidance came from experiences far beyond their imagination. 3 weeks into basic training, the routine had become familiar to all the recruits. Sarah continued to blend in perfectly with her fellow trainees, maintaining her careful balance of competence without standing out too much. The drill sergeants had begun to recognize her as a solid, reliable recruit who could be counted on to complete tasks and help maintain group morale. On this particular morning, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez announced that they would be conducting a new type of exercise. "Today we're going to test your problem-solving abilities under pressure," he declared. "You'll be working in teams to complete a series of tactical challenges." The recruits were divided into groups of 6. Sarah found herself teamed with Jessica, Marcus, Jake, Lisa, and a quiet young man named David from Wisconsin. Jake immediately tried to take charge of the group, as he had been doing since their first day. "Okay, everyone, listen to me," Jake announced. "I've studied military tactics, so I should be the team leader. Just follow my instructions and we'll ace this thing." Sarah remained silent, though she could already see several flaws in Jake's approach to leadership. In her experience, the loudest person was rarely the best leader, especially in high-pressure situations. But she decided to observe and support rather than challenge him directly. The first exercise involved navigating an obstacle course while carrying supplies and maintaining communication. Jake's plan was overly complicated and didn't account for the different physical abilities of team members. Within minutes, the group was struggling and falling behind other teams. "This isn't working," Jessica said, breathing heavily as she struggled with her assigned load. "Maybe we should try a different approach." "No, stick to the plan," Jake insisted. "We just need to move faster." Sarah watched as their team continued to fall further behind. She could easily complete this course in half the time, and she knew exactly how to organize the team for maximum efficiency. But revealing that knowledge would raise questions she wasn't prepared to answer. Instead, she made small suggestions that seemed to come naturally from the situation. "Maybe if Marcus takes some of Jessica's load, and we modify the route slightly to avoid that muddy section," she offered quietly. Her suggestions helped, but Jake took credit for the improvements and continued to insist on maintaining overall control. Sarah let him, understanding that sometimes the best leadership meant knowing when not to lead. The second exercise was more complex. The teams were presented with a simulated hostage situation and had to develop a tactical response. They were given basic information about the scenario and asked to create a plan for safely extracting civilians while neutralizing the threat. Jake immediately began outlining an elaborate assault plan that showed he had been watching too many action movies. His strategy was aggressive, risky, and would likely result in unnecessary casualties in a real situation. Sarah listened quietly, her mind automatically analyzing the scenario with years of actual tactical experience. She could see at least 3 better approaches that would minimize risk and maximize success probability. The setup reminded her of a similar situation she had faced 18 months earlier in Eastern Europe, though obviously she couldn't mention that. "What do you think, Sarah?" asked David, who had noticed that she always seemed to have good insights. "Well," Sarah said carefully, "maybe we should prioritize the safety of the hostages first. If we create a distraction here," she pointed to the map, "and approach from this angle, we could potentially get the civilians out before engaging the threat. Her suggestion was tactically sound and showed a level of strategic thinking that impressed the other team members. Even Jake had to admit that her idea had merit, though he tried to modify it to maintain his leadership position. As they refined their plan, Sarah found herself naturally taking more of a guidance role. Her questions and suggestions helped the team develop a much more sophisticated and effective strategy. She was careful to frame her contributions as collaborative thoughts rather than authoritative commands. "How did you come up with that?" Lisa asked after Sarah identified a potential blind spot in their approach. "I guess I just try to think through all the possibilities," Sarah replied. "My dad always taught me to consider what could go wrong before making important decisions." That was true. Though her father had been teaching her those lessons in the context of actual combat situations, not theoretical exercises, her real education in tactical thinking had come from Navy SEAL instructors who had demanded perfection because mistakes meant death. When it came time to present their plan to the drill sergeants, their team performed exceptionally well. Sergeant Rodriguez and the other instructors asked detailed questions about their strategy, and the team was able to provide thoughtful answers, thanks largely to Sarah's behind-the-scenes guidance. "Outstanding work," Sergeant Rodriguez told them afterward. "That was one of the most thorough and realistic tactical assessments we've seen from a recruit team." Jake beamed with pride, taking full credit for their success. Sarah didn't mind. She had learned long ago that mission success was more important than personal recognition. The best operators often worked in shadows, making critical contributions that others never saw or understood. That evening, as the recruits cleaned their equipment and prepared for the next day, Jessica approached Sarah privately. "I don't know how you do it," Jessica said. "You always seem to know exactly what needs to be done, but you never make a big deal about it. It's like you have some kind of natural instinct for this stuff." Sarah smiled. "I think we all have different strengths. You're great at keeping everyone motivated, and Marcus is really good at the technical details. It's about working together." "Maybe, but there's something different about you," Jessica persisted. "You're always so calm and focused even when everything is chaotic. And your suggestions always seem to work perfectly." "I guess I just handle pressure well," Sarah replied. Which was certainly true, though Jessica had no idea what kind of pressure Sarah had learned to handle. Later that night, as the barracks grew quiet, Sarah lay on her bunk reflecting on the day's events. She was genuinely enjoying the teamwork aspects of basic training, and she felt good about helping her fellow recruits succeed. But she also knew that maintaining her cover was becoming more challenging as the exercises grew more complex. Her real training and experience gave her insights that were difficult to hide completely. Every tactical situation triggered automatic responses based on years of advanced instruction and real-world application. She had to constantly monitor herself to ensure she didn't accidentally reveal knowledge that a typical recruit shouldn't possess. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Sergeant Rodriguez announced that their training company had been selected for a special demonstration exercise that would take place in front of visiting military officials and instructors from various specialties. "This is an opportunity to show what you've learned and how well you can perform under observation," he explained. "The exercise will be more challenging than anything you've done so far, and you'll be evaluated not just on completion but on teamwork, leadership, and tactical thinking." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest. High-profile demonstrations meant increased scrutiny and more opportunities for her carefully maintained cover to slip. She would need to be even more careful about balancing competence with concealment. The special demonstration exercise was scheduled for the following week, and the entire training company felt the pressure mounting. Word had spread that high-ranking officers from different military branches would be observing, along with instructors from elite training programs who were evaluating the effectiveness of current basic training methods. Sarah noticed increased tension among her fellow recruits. Conversations during meals focused on concerns about performing well under such important observation. Some recruits worried that poor performance might negatively impact their future military assignments. "I heard that some of the observers are from Special Forces units," Marcus whispered during breakfast. "They're supposed to be looking for recruits who show exceptional potential." "That's just a rumor," Jake replied, though his voice betrayed his own nervousness. "Besides, they wouldn't recruit anyone directly from basic training. You have to complete your initial service commitment first. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but Jake's comment was incorrect. She knew that exceptional recruits were sometimes identified early and tracked for potential special operations careers. The process was much more complex than most people understood, involving psychological evaluations, extensive background checks, and gradual introduction to increasingly challenging training programs. Over the next few days, the drill sergeants pushed the recruits harder than ever before. Physical training became more intense, tactical exercises grew more complex, and the standards for acceptable performance were raised significantly. Several recruits who had been struggling began to fall behind more noticeably. Sarah maintained her careful balance, performing well enough to avoid criticism, but not so exceptionally that she drew unwanted attention. During weapons training, she had to consciously dial back her natural accuracy. Her muscle memory wanted to place every shot in a tight grouping at the center of the target, but she forced herself to shoot with the slightly less precise technique that would be expected from someone with her supposed background. The night before the demonstration, Sarah lay awake listening to her fellow recruits toss and turn in their bunks. The anxiety in the barracks was almost tangible. She heard whispered conversations between recruits trying to calm each other's nerves and reassure themselves about their preparation. "What if we mess up in front of all those officers?" Jessica whispered from the next bunk. "We won't," Sarah replied quietly. "We've trained hard and we know what we're doing. Just focus on working together as a team." Her words seemed to help, and gradually the barracks grew quiet as the recruits finally fell asleep. Sarah remained awake longer, her mind automatically running through various scenarios and contingencies. It was a habit developed through years of mission planning, where overlooking any detail could have fatal consequences. The morning of the demonstration arrived gray and overcast. The recruits were up earlier than usual, with extra time allocated for preparation and equipment checks. Sarah went through her routine methodically, ensuring her uniform was perfect and her equipment was in optimal condition. As they assembled in formation, Sarah could see the observation area where numerous military officials had gathered. She recognized some of the insignia and unit patches, including several that indicated special operations backgrounds. Her heart rate increased slightly, though she kept her expression calm and focused. Sergeant Rodriguez addressed the company with unusual formality. "Today you represent not just yourselves, but this entire training facility and the effectiveness of our program. The observers are here to evaluate our methods and identify areas for improvement. Your performance matters not just for your own careers, but for future recruits who will go through this program." The demonstration began with basic military formations and drill movements. The recruits performed well, moving with the precision and coordination they had developed over weeks of practice. Sarah fell into the rhythm easily, her movements sharp and confident without being unnecessarily flashy. Next came physical fitness demonstrations. The recruits ran an obstacle course while being timed and evaluated on form and technique. Sarah completed the course efficiently, finishing in the upper portion of the group without breaking any records. She noticed several observers taking notes and making quiet comments to each other. The tactical exercise portion was the most complex part of the demonstration. The recruit companies were divided into smaller teams and given a scenario involving the protection of a critical supply convoy while under simulated enemy attack. Each team had to develop and execute a response plan while being observed and evaluated. Sarah's team included her usual training partners, with Jake still attempting to maintain his leadership position. However, the complexity and pressure of the situation quickly exposed the limitations of his knowledge and experience. Within minutes of receiving their briefing, it became clear that his planned approach was inadequate for the scenario they faced. "We need to establish a perimeter here and wait for support," Jake announced, pointing to a location on the tactical map that would actually expose them to crossfire from multiple directions. Sarah could see the flaws immediately. The position Jake had chosen offered poor cover, limited escape routes, and no tactical advantage. In a real situation, it would be a death trap. She also noticed that one of the observers, a Navy officer with a distinctive pin on his uniform, was watching their team's planning session with particular interest. "Maybe we should consider this alternative," Sarah suggested, indicating a different position that offered better protection and tactical flexibility. "It provides better sight lines and multiple exit strategies if we need to relocate." Her suggestion was tactically superior, and even Jake could see the advantages. But as they began implementing the plan, Sarah found herself naturally taking more of a leadership role. Her questions and suggestions guided the team toward increasingly sophisticated tactical thinking. "What about fields of fire?" she asked. "And how do we maintain communication if we get separated?" "Good points," said David. "Sarah, what do you think about positioning?" Without thinking, Sarah began explaining optimal positioning principles, discussing concepts like overlapping fields of fire, mutual support, and tactical depth. Her explanation was detailed, precise, and demonstrated a level of knowledge that went far beyond what any recruit should possess. The words flowed naturally from years of advanced tactical training, and by the time Sarah realized what she was doing, it was too late. She had revealed knowledge that no civilian recruit could possibly have acquired through normal channels. The Navy observer had moved closer and was now listening intently to every word. Sarah noticed his attention and tried to dial back her explanations, but the damage was already done. Her fellow team members were staring at her with surprise and confusion. "How do you know all this stuff?" Marcus asked. "This sounds like advanced military tactics." Sarah felt her carefully maintained cover beginning to crack. "I've read a lot of military history and tactical manuals," she replied, but even she could hear how inadequate that explanation sounded. The Navy observer stepped forward. "Excuse me, recruit. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Sarah's heart pounded as she realized that her secret was about to be exposed. After weeks of successful concealment, one moment of instinctive tactical thinking had revealed more than she intended. The observer's eyes showed a recognition that made it clear he suspected something significant about her background. As she stepped away from her team to speak with the officer, Sarah knew that her time as just another recruit was about to end. The question now was how her real identity would be revealed, and what consequences that revelation would have for her mission and her fellow recruits. The Navy observer led Sarah away from her team to a quiet area where they could speak privately. As they walked, Sarah's mind raced through possible explanations and responses, but she knew that her advanced tactical knowledge had already revealed too much. "I'm Commander Harrison," the officer said when they were out of earshot from the other recruits. "I specialize in evaluating training programs and identifying exceptional talent." "That was quite an impressive tactical analysis you just gave your team." Sarah maintained her composure, though internally she was calculating the best way to handle this conversation. "Thank you, sir. I've always been interested in military strategy." Commander Harrison studied her carefully. "Your knowledge goes beyond casual interest. The concepts you discussed, overlapping fields of fire, tactical depth, mutual support positioning, these aren't things you learn from reading history books. They require practical training and experience." "I've participated in some civilian tactical training programs," Sarah replied, sticking to her cover story. "And I've done extensive research on military operations." "Which programs?" Commander Harrison asked immediately. "Who are your instructors? What facilities did you train at?" The rapid-fire questions were designed to test the validity of her claims, and Sarah realized that any specific answers she gave could be easily verified. A vague response would be equally suspicious at this point. Before she could answer, Sergeant Rodriguez approached them. "Sir, is there a problem with Recruit Martinez?" "Not a problem," Commander Harrison replied. "I'm just curious about her background. Her tactical knowledge is quite advanced for someone entering basic training." Sergeant Rodriguez looked surprised. "Martinez has been one of our most reliable recruits. Good performance across all areas, excellent teamwork, natural leadership qualities, but I haven't noticed anything unusual about her tactical knowledge. Perhaps you should observe her more closely," Commander Harrison suggested. "I'd be very interested in your assessment of her capabilities." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. The attention she had tried so hard to avoid was now focused directly on her, and more observers would be watching her every move. Her carefully planned mission of blending in and completing basic training quietly was rapidly becoming impossible. As they returned to the demonstration exercise, Sarah noticed that several other observers were now watching her team with increased interest. Word had apparently spread that there was something noteworthy about one of the recruits in their group. Her teammates immediately sensed that something had changed. "What was that all about?" Jessica asked quietly. "Just some questions about my background," Sarah replied, trying to sound casual. "Nothing important." But it was clear that everyone knew something significant had happened. Jake looked particularly puzzled, since Sarah's advanced knowledge had effectively undermined his assumed leadership position during the tactical planning. The demonstration exercise continued, but Sarah could feel multiple sets of eyes tracking her every move. She tried to dial back her performance and blend in with the group, but it was too late. The observers were now specifically looking for signs of advanced training and exceptional capability. During the next phase of the exercise, which involved responding to a simulated ambush, Sarah faced an impossible choice. Her team was making tactical errors that would result in failure of the mission and poor evaluation scores for everyone involved. She could either let them fail to maintain her cover or provide the guidance needed for success while further exposing her real background. The simulated attack began with explosive sounds and smoke grenades creating confusion and limiting visibility. Several team members immediately made critical mistakes, moving toward positions that offered no cover and clustering together in ways that would make them easy targets. Sarah watched as Jake tried to maintain command but clearly had no idea how to respond effectively to the chaotic situation. Marcus and David looked to him for guidance, but his instructions were putting them in greater danger within the context of the exercise. "Everyone stay calm and follow me," Jake shouted over the noise, then proceeded to lead them directly toward the most exposed area of the battlefield. Sarah couldn't let her teammates fail, especially when their failure would result from following bad tactical decisions. Despite the risk to her cover, she began providing rapid, precise guidance. "No, this way," she called out, directing them toward better cover. "David, watch that flank. Marcus, establish overwatch from that position. Jessica, maintain communication with base." Her commands were crisp, professional, and tactically perfect. Within minutes, she had reorganized the team into an effective combat formation that successfully completed the exercise objectives. But in doing so, she had demonstrated a level of tactical command ability that no basic training recruit should possess. The observers were taking extensive notes now, and Sarah could see animated discussions taking place among the evaluation team. Commander Harrison was speaking intently with several other officers, occasionally pointing in her direction. When the exercise concluded, Sarah's team had achieved the highest performance scores of any group in the demonstration. Their tactical execution had been flawless, their communication excellent, and their mission completion time was significantly better than any other team. "How did you know to do all that?" Lisa asked as they gathered their equipment. "You took charge like you've done this 100 times before." Sarah realized that there was no longer any way to maintain her cover story. Her performance had been too exceptional, her knowledge too advanced, and her leadership too professional to be explained by civilian training programs or casual study. As the recruits formed up for the concluding ceremony, Sergeant Rodriguez approached Sarah with a serious expression. "Martinez, you need to come with me. There are some people who want to speak with you immediately." Sarah followed him toward a group of high-ranking officers who had been observing the demonstration. She recognized insignia from multiple military branches, including several special operations units. At the center of the group stood a woman with the rank insignia of a Navy captain, whose unit patches indicated extensive special operations experience. "Recruit Martinez," the captain said as Sarah approached. "I'm Captain Williams. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about who you really are and why you're here." Sarah realized that her mission parameters were about to change dramatically. The careful infiltration and evaluation exercise she had been conducting was now exposed, and she would need to decide how much of the truth to reveal. But before she could respond, Captain Williams continued with a statement that shocked Sarah completely. "We know exactly who you are, Petty Officer Martinez. The question is whether you're ready to tell your fellow recruits the truth about your real background and why a Navy SEAL with multiple combat deployments is going through basic training with a group of civilian recruits." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her cover hadn't just been compromised, it had been completely blown. Somehow these officers had identified not just her military background, but her specific unit and operational history. Her mission had just become exponentially more complicated. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face as Captain Williams's words sank in. Her carefully constructed cover identity had not just been compromised, it had been completely exposed by people who clearly knew exactly who she was and what she represented. "Think there's been some misunderstanding," Ma'am? Sarah began, but Captain Williams raised her hand to stop her. Petty Officer First Class Sarah Martinez, Navy SEAL Team 3, 2 combat deployments to Afghanistan, 1 classified operation in Eastern Europe. Recipient of the Bronze Star with V device for valor in combat, Captain Williams recited. Should I continue or are you ready to drop the act? Sarah's training kicked in, and she maintained her composure despite the shock. How long have you known? From the moment you stepped off the bus 3 weeks ago, Captain Williams replied. Did you really think you could infiltrate a military training facility without us knowing exactly who you are? The revelation was staggering. Sarah realized that her entire mission had been observed and potentially manipulated from the very beginning. Every interaction, every carefully calculated response, every moment of hiding her true abilities had been watched by people who knew exactly what they were looking at. Then why let me continue? Sarah asked. Commander Harrison stepped forward. Because we needed to see how well you could blend in with civilian recruits and whether your training assessment mission would yield useful data. Your evaluation of our basic training programs has been very valuable. Sarah's mind raced as she processed this information. Her mission hadn't been a secret infiltration at all. It had been an open evaluation exercise where she was the one being evaluated just as much as the training program itself. The recruits don't know, she stated rather than asked. Correct, Captain Williams confirmed. And that's about to change. Your performance today made it impossible to maintain the deception any longer. When a supposed civilian recruit demonstrates advanced tactical knowledge that exceeds some of our junior officers, questions become inevitable. Sarah looked back toward where her fellow recruits were still gathered, unaware of the conversation taking place. Jessica, Marcus, David, Lisa, and even Jake. They had all trusted her, accepted her as one of them, shared their fears and hopes with someone they believed was facing the same challenges they were. What happens now? Sarah asked. That depends partly on you, Captain Williams replied. We had planned to reveal your identity at the end of basic training as part of a larger evaluation of how civilian recruits respond to discovering they've been training alongside an experienced special operations warrior. Your performance today has accelerated that timeline. Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Ma'am, the recruits are asking questions about what's happening. They know something significant is going on. Captain Williams nodded. Very well. Petty Officer Martinez, you have a choice. You can maintain your cover and we'll find a way to explain away today's demonstration. Or you can reveal your true identity to your fellow recruits and help us complete the evaluation exercise as originally planned. Sarah considered the options. Maintaining her cover would mean lying to people who had become friends and teammates. But revealing her identity would fundamentally change every relationship she had built over the past 3 weeks. What would revealing my identity accomplish? She asked. We want to study how civilian recruits react to learning they've been training alongside someone with your level of experience, Commander Harrison explained. How does it affect their confidence, their perception of their own abilities, their understanding of what's possible with proper training and dedication? Sarah thought about Jessica's encouragement during difficult exercises, Marcus's technical questions, David's quiet determination, and even Jake's misguided but genuine attempts at leadership. These people had become more than just mission objectives. They had become friends. I'll tell them, Sarah decided. But I want to do it my way, and I want to answer their questions honestly. Captain Williams smiled for the first time during the conversation. I was hoping you'd say that. Your fellow recruits deserve to know the truth, and they deserve to hear it from you. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in front of her training company with every recruit gathered around. The observers remained at a distance, taking notes but trying not to interfere with the moment. Sergeant Rodriguez had explained only that there was something important the recruits needed to learn about one of their fellow trainees. Sarah looked at the faces of people who had shared the past 3 weeks with her. Jessica's supportive smile, Marcus's curious expression, David's quiet attention, Lisa's concerned look, and Jake's confused frown. They had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks ago when I got off that bus with all of you, I wasn't exactly who I said I was, Sarah began. My name really is Sarah Martinez, and I really do want to serve my country. But I wasn't a civilian recruit starting her military career. She could see confusion spreading across their faces as they tried to understand what she meant. I'm a petty officer first class in the United States Navy, and I'm a member of SEAL Team 3. I've been a Navy SEAL for the past 4 years, with multiple combat deployments and specialized training that most people will never see. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see shock, confusion, and the beginning of understanding dawning on different faces. Jessica's mouth fell open. Marcus stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. David nodded slowly as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. Jake was the first to speak. You mean you've been pretending to be a recruit while you're actually... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I wasn't pretending to be anything, Sarah replied firmly. Everything I shared with you about wanting to serve and challenge myself was true. I was here on a mission to evaluate the effectiveness of basic training programs, but every friendship, every moment of support, every time I helped someone, that was all real. So when you gave us tactical advice, Lisa said slowly, you actually knew what you were talking about because you've done it for real. Yes, Sarah confirmed. In Afghanistan, in Eastern Europe, and in training exercises that simulate the most dangerous situations military personnel can face. The questions came rapidly then. How long had she been a SEAL? What kind of missions had she been on? Why was she really there? How much of what they thought they knew about her was actually true? Sarah answered every question she could, explaining her background, her training, and the real purpose of her presence in basic training. She was careful not to reveal classified information, but she was honest about her experience and capabilities. Does this mean we're not really good at this stuff? Marcus asked, voicing what several others were clearly thinking. Were we only successful because we had a Navy SEAL helping us? Sarah shook her head emphatically. You are absolutely good at this stuff. Every improvement you made, every challenge you overcame, every moment of courage you showed, that was all you. I may have provided some guidance, but I couldn't do the work for you. The conversation continued for over an hour, as the recruits processed the shocking revelation about their teammate. Sarah found herself sharing more about her experiences than she had originally planned, but she felt these people deserved honest answers after weeks of building genuine relationships. What was it like? Jessica asked quietly. The real missions, I mean. Sarah considered her words carefully. Intense. Everything happens faster than you expect, and there's no room for mistakes. But the training prepares you for it, and you learn to trust your teammates completely. The bond between operators is unlike anything else. Were you ever scared? David asked. Every time, Sarah replied honestly. Fear keeps you sharp and helps you make good decisions. The difference between being brave and being reckless is acknowledging the fear and working through it. Jake, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. I feel like an idiot. All those times I tried to tell you what to do, when you knew more about this stuff than I'll probably ever know. Sarah turned to face him directly. Jake, you showed leadership qualities that can't be taught. You stepped up when you thought your team needed guidance, and you were willing to take responsibility for outcomes. That takes courage, and it's exactly what the military needs in its leaders. But I was wrong about so many things, Jake protested. So was I during my first training exercises, Sarah replied. The difference between a good leader and a great one isn't whether you make mistakes. It's whether you learn from them and adapt. You did that every time I or someone else suggested improvements. Marcus raised his hand tentatively. Can I ask you something personal? Why did you become a SEAL? Sarah smiled at the memory. I wanted to prove that I could do something most people thought was impossible. Growing up, I was always told that certain things were too dangerous or too difficult for someone like me. I decided to find out for myself what I was actually capable of. And, Lisa prompted, I discovered that the only real limitations are the ones we accept in our own minds, Sarah replied. The physical and mental challenges of SEAL training were exactly as difficult as advertised, but they weren't impossible. Every human being has far more potential than they realize. Captain Williams approached the group, indicating that the informal discussion would need to conclude soon. But before dismissing the recruits, she addressed them directly. What you've experienced over the past 3 weeks is exactly what we hoped to learn about, she told them. You've proven that civilian recruits can work effectively alongside experienced military personnel without knowing their backgrounds. More importantly, you've shown that proper mentorship and guidance can accelerate learning and improve performance without creating dependence. Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward. The performance scores for this recruit class are among the highest we've ever recorded. Your teamwork, tactical thinking, and problem-solving abilities have all exceeded expectations. Is that because Sarah was helping us? Marcus asked. Partly, Sergeant Rodriguez admitted, but her guidance only worked because you were willing to listen, learn, and apply what you learned. Many recruit classes have had experienced military personnel among them, but few have shown the kind of improvement and cohesion your group has demonstrated. Sarah looked around at her fellow recruits, realizing how much they had all grown over the past 3 weeks. Jessica had developed genuine confidence in her physical abilities. Marcus had learned to trust his analytical skills under pressure. David had discovered a talent for tactical thinking that surprised everyone, including himself. Lisa had overcome her initial fears and become one of the most reliable team members. Even Jake had evolved from someone who tried to lead through authority to someone who could actually inspire others to follow. So what happens now? Jessica asked. Captain Williams answered. Your basic training continues for another week, but with full knowledge of Petty Officer Martinez's background. We're interested in seeing how this knowledge affects group dynamics and individual performance. Will Sarah stay with us? David asked. If she's willing, Captain Williams replied, looking to Sarah for confirmation. Sarah nodded without hesitation. I'd like to finish what we started together. The final week of basic training proved to be the most interesting for everyone involved. The recruits' knowledge of Sarah's background changed the dynamics in subtle but significant ways. Instead of trying to hide her expertise, Sarah was able to provide more direct instruction and explanation when appropriate. Jessica became more confident in asking detailed questions about techniques and strategies. Marcus began analyzing tactical problems with greater sophistication, knowing that he could get expert feedback on his thinking. David's natural tactical instincts were encouraged and developed more rapidly with proper mentorship. Even Jake evolved into a more effective leader, learning to leverage the expertise available to him, rather than feeling threatened by it. He began asking Sarah for private coaching sessions on leadership principles, and his ability to organize and motivate the group improved dramatically. The final exercise of basic training was the most challenging yet, a complex scenario involving multiple objectives, time pressure, and coordination between several teams. The observers watched carefully to see how the group would perform with full knowledge of Sarah's capabilities. The recruits surprised everyone by performing even better than before. Rather than becoming dependent on Sarah's expertise, they had learned to think more tactically themselves while using her knowledge as a resource for validation and refinement of their own ideas. Outstanding performance, Sergeant Rodriguez told the company at their graduation ceremony. You've demonstrated that effective integration of experienced personnel with new recruits can benefit everyone involved. Captain Williams addressed the graduates personally. Each of you has proven that you have the potential to excel in whatever military specialty you choose to pursue. More importantly, you've learned that working with people of different backgrounds and experience levels can make everyone stronger. After the ceremony, as the new soldiers prepared to leave for their advanced training assignments, Sarah's teammates gathered around her one final time. Will we see you again? Jessica asked. The military is smaller than you think, Sarah replied with a smile. Our paths may cross again someday. Thank you, David said simply. For everything you taught us, but especially for treating us like real teammates even when you could have just completed your mission without getting involved. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with mission, accomplishment, or professional recognition. Thank you for teaching me something too. What did we teach you? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. That the best part of being good at something isn't what you can accomplish alone, Sarah replied. It's what you can help other people discover about themselves. As her teammates departed for their next assignments, Sarah realized that her evaluation mission had yielded unexpected results. She had learned as much about leadership, mentorship, and the value of authentic relationships as the recruits had learned about military skills and tactical thinking. The experience had reminded her why she had chosen to serve in the first place, not just to prove her own capabilities, but to be part of something larger than herself and to help others reach their own potential. 3 months later, Sarah received letters from several of her former teammates, updating her on their progress in advanced training. Each had excelled in their chosen specialties, and each credited the lessons learned during those 3 weeks of basic training for giving them confidence and skills that continued to serve them well. Jessica had been selected for an advanced leadership development program. Marcus was excelling in intelligence analysis training. David had been accepted into a competitive tactical operations course. Lisa was thriving in logistics coordination specialty training. Even Jake had found his calling in personnel management and was being considered for accelerated promotion. Sarah kept those letters in her personal gear, a reminder that some missions yield benefits that can't be measured in traditional after-action reports. The true success of her evaluation exercise wasn't captured in the official documentation. It was reflected in the continued growth and achievement of people who had learned to see themselves and their potential in an entirely new way.